All right, well, welcome to our class. I did a class yesterday, and one of the things we talked about was energy levels, and we had people draw a graph, and it kind of went like that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So hopefully you're not feeling that way, okay? Hopefully you have some energy for me, and we'll have a great time together for this hour. A friend of mine did a survey, and he asked 5,000 leaders in all different positions, all different industries, all different organizations. He asked them one question: what do you want from your people? Think about that for a minute. If you had to put it in one word as a leader, what do you want from your people? Any thoughts? Dedication? Engagement? Productivity? Leadership? Integrity? What? Respect. Okay, those are all great answers. What he found was 75% of the people said commitment. Okay, I think a lot of the things that you said all tie into that. But commitment was the number one thing that leaders wanted. They wanted people to be committed to, and that way, if people are committed, then they're going to be respectful, then they're going to be engaged, all these things that you guys talked about. So commitment is what we want from our people. Typically, are people committed to organizations? And maybe UDOT's a little different because we heard today how committed people are. Typically, people are committed to people, right? When you get up in the morning and you go to work, maybe you're really excited about whatever organization you work for, but more than likely you're thinking, how excited am I about working with this group of people, right? It's about the people that we work with. So typically people are committed to people. And so that means that leaders make all the difference in the world. So the title of my talk today is Partnership is a New Leadership. As I've thought about this and as I've thought about leadership, I think more than leadership being something, maybe in the olden days, it was a matter of you had that title, so you demanded respect because you were a leader. If that's the way it used to be, those days are gone. That doesn't happen anymore. Okay? Just even the fact one of my associates said in the booth as I was introducing her to somebody that used to be another company, she's like, man, people move around a lot, don't they? Okay? The days of go to work 30 years, get your gold watch. Maybe a few people still do that, but for the most part, it's not like that anymore. So we're in a new economy, and my argument is that the new economy is looking for a new type of leadership. So we're going to call that for today at least, partnership is a new leadership. A few months ago, there was an argument between two cousins who were part business owners in a business, okay? That's not newsworthy. That happens all the time. Anybody ever been involved in a family business of any sort? Okay. It's easy to have these little arguments and things going on. Well, these two cousins started, they'd had years of not getting along. I want to introduce you to them. Arthur T. DeMullis is his last name. He's the CEO of the company. The company is a chain of grocery stores called Market Basket. They're located out on the East Coast, 71 different grocery stores in this market chain. Arthur T. owned 49.5% of the company, and he was the CEO. Well, Arthur T. and Arthur S., so how much do you think Arthur S. owned? Okay, he owned 50.5. So Arthur T. and Arthur S., they had very different opinions of leadership. Arthur T., when he hired on a new employee just to be the clerk, the checkout clerk, he paid $12 an hour. Minimum wage is $8 an hour. But he believed if he invested in his people, that would pay off and they would be successful. Arthur T. also implemented a tuition reimbursement program where every quarter, if you wanted to go to college, they would reimburse you up to $1,000 a quarter to go to college. Arthur S., he hated making that payment. He hated it. So they weren't getting along so well. Arthur S. went to the board of directors, and he got them to actually fire Arthur T. What happened next was newsworthy, and this is where I learned about it. I learned about it on the news. 20,000 employees went on strike. They're like, we do not want to work under this leadership. We want our leader back. 20,000 people were willing to risk their job, risk their future. Why would they do that? Okay, he's a great leader. They were committed to him. And he was committed to them. They started doing some news reports on this, and what they found was every employee that they interviewed had some sort of a connection with Arthur T. One employee said, one night he was here when I was going home, he walked out to my car with me. He asked me questions about my family. He wanted to know about my life and how I was. Another employee said he's always there before one of the stores opens. He's there in the morning, he greets us, he says, thank you for being here, I appreciate all your hard work, I'm so glad that you're a part of our organization. And so even though he had thousands of employees, they all felt like they had some connection to him. So he was a true partner in the way that he led. So what happened was these employees went on strike, and the grocery stores just looked like a ghost town. They stopped taking shipments because there was nobody to work at the grocery stores. So it was chaos for a few weeks, and then Arthur T. was able to buy out Arthur S. and take over as CEO again, and now they're back up and running and being even more successful than they were before. So I like to start out with that story just because I think it so clearly shows the difference in two leadership styles, okay? They have the same name, they're cousins, but their belief on how they led was so completely different. So I want you to think for a minute about a leader that's had an impact in your life. Somebody that's mentored you, been a partner with you. Anybody have an example they would share? I'll pull out the white chocolate popcorn for a bribe. Come on, somebody tell me a good story. I know you've had them. Tamara. Perfect. You just won yourself a popcorn. Okay, so that's a great example. All right, does everybody have a handout? We're going to jump over to our handout. Okay, so my first set of blanks there, every follower is asking, do you blank about me? What would that be? Care, you got it. Do you care about me? That's what people want to know. If you're their leader, they really do want to know. Do you care about them? One of the things I want to just say before we get further into this is I am of the belief that a leader, like I said, it's not necessarily a position. It's not necessarily an authority. I believe that anybody can be a leader. So as we go into all this, sure, if you're a supervisor or if you're running your own organization, you're going to have different applications of leadership, but the reality is that we can all be leaders in all different kinds of situations. So no matter what your position, I want you to take this and know that you can apply this and make a difference. So the first one is, do you care about me? Hey, people are curious. What are your motives? As you lead me, what are your motives? Do you really care about me, or do you just care about growing your company? And the way that we treat people, it's going to show whether we care about them or not. Has anybody ever heard of Harvey Mackay? He was on the Shark Tank, and he's written a lot of books. Anyway, he has a tool. It's called the Customer 60 or something like that. And it's 60 questions that he encourages his salespeople to know about their client. And it's everything from where did they go to college, did they play sports, how many kids do they have, just all kinds of things. But I've taken that and I thought, I want to know every single thing about each of my employees. I want to know everything that I can know about them because I care about them. So as a leader, we need to dig deep and find out and learn about our employees. The second one, can you blank? Help. You guys are so good. Okay, can you help me? That's what a leader is there to do, right? A leader should add value. A leader should create a culture that is going to help the employees that are there. Yes, they're there to help the company, but the leader, I believe, is responsible to create this culture that's going to help each individual while they're there, however long they're there, to become better. And then the third one is, you guys are so good. You had the answer key. Can I trust you? That's bottom line what people want to know. If I share something with you, is it going to be safe? If you tell me you're going to do something, are you really going to do it? Okay, so can I trust you? So those are the three things that every follower is asking a leader. These are the things that they really want to know. One of my favorite quotes that I didn't write in here, but it's by Norman Schwarzkopf, and it says, leadership is a potent combination of strategy and character. But if you must choose only one, go without the strategy, okay? And to me, that ties into, can people really trust you? Do you care about them? And that's the bottom line. To be a leader, we need to do those things. So number 2, as a leader, we need to lead with vision, passion, and a desire to build leaders, not followers. And I think this is one of the most interesting kind of paradigm shifts that we need to have, is as we think about being leaders, we think, well, I need people that are going to help me do this and help me do that we're going to have these followers. But in reality, what we want to build, right, is we want to build leaders. We want to build leaders that are capable to lead themselves, to not only perform whatever activity it is that we need them to do, but that they can also be leaders, and they have that potential and that ability to become leaders themselves. So the answer to number A, I'm sure, is simple. What is the blank there? When you think of vision, I think of Bill Gates. Okay, can anybody else remember back? I always share secrets when I'm speaking, but I graduated in 1981, okay? And I remember there was a guy that was in my physics class, and he came out to my house out on the farm so we could study for our final exam, and he was talking about these computer things. And he's like, someday I think there's going to be one in every home. And my mom was like, what in the world would I ever do with a computer? And so the other day when my mom was on Facebook and email, I was asking her if she remembered that, and she didn't remember it. But that was really, he had a vision. He had a vision that nobody else could see. He knew that was what he was going to accomplish. So as you think about yourself, and again, if you're the supervisor, it's probably easier to establish that vision, but I don't think you have to be the supervisor. But what is your vision for wherever you're at right now? And again, I had a couple people come and talk to me yesterday after the time management one, and they said, I was really looking forward to getting some tips on email and how I could do things more efficiently at work, but what I walked away with is, I'm going to take this home to my family. I'm going to be more present at home. So I hope the things that we're talking about here today, yes, they apply to work, but I think there's probably situations where you can take them to your family, or maybe you have a position in your community. Maybe you volunteer on a board somewhere or in a church organization. So when you think about vision, I'm a firm believer that if you have a vision and you can explain that to other people, people are going to be a lot more apt to follow you and to support whatever it is that you're doing. My first job out of school, I worked for the Forest Service. I was on the Uinta National Forest in Provo, and I had the opportunity to work with a fantastic leader. He was our forest supervisor at the time. And I remember him sitting me down in his office one day and telling me, a true leader is somebody that can establish a vision and then remove the stumbling blocks so that other people can go accomplish that. It's like it's not the role of the leader to do everything to accomplish the mission or the vision. The leader figures out what that is, where you want to go, figures out how to communicate that to people so that they understand it, and then he or she removes those stumbling blocks so that everybody else can work and get there. And I love that. But I've just had so many great opportunities to create a vision. I've had 2 different nonprofits that I've started, and one of them literally started at a conference on a napkin. Me and 3 guys from a water district sitting around talking about how we could improve their water systems and maybe get some funding. And we just sat there, and I just helped them put words to some things that they were rolling around, and we came up with a vision. And over the past 10 years, we've gotten millions of dollars worth of grant money to help them improve these water systems in rural Utah, just because I was able to help them create this vision. This is where we want to go. This is what we want to do. So whether it's that or just within your family of having, more cooperation, getting the chores done, help create that vision of what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to be like? There's so much power in that, and that's what a leader needs to provide. The second thing is passion. People are going to follow passion. It goes right along with energy, okay? So if you really want people to accomplish this vision that you've set, you got to be passionate about it. You got to explain to people, this is why we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it, and get them excited about it. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to hear a speaker who had been an NFL player, and he played with John Elway. And he talked about his most intriguing and favorite thing about playing with John Elway is he said when we have the training camp before the season ever starts, he said we would have lunch together every day. And he said every day John would sit at a different table with different players. And while he was sitting there having lunch with them, he would share with them, this is my vision. We're going to win a Super Bowl. This is where we're going. And he said he would just get them fired up. And you couldn't help but be excited when he's sitting there telling you, this is what we're going to do. I know we're going to do it. He's like, but then the next day he'd go to a different table and he would share that vision and he would share his passion. And I think as leaders, I think that's just exactly what we can do. And again, whatever that vision is, that we share that with our people. We share it in groups when we're having our meetings together in groups. We share that. And when we're one-on-one with people, we share, this is our vision. This is how we're going to get better. These are the things that we're going to do. So that vision and that passion go together to make that work. And then the third one is compassion. So Dwight Eisenhower once said, you don't lead people by hitting them over the head. That's assault, not leadership. Okay, so leadership is the blank there. A soft touch, a willingness to listen and help is much more preferable and effective. Okay, so we did one of the workshops earlier was on StrengthsFinder. But compassion isn't usually a word that we typically associate with engineers and engineering organizations, right? And the reality is some of us are probably come by it more naturally than others, okay? I'm going to share a story with you that the people my supervisor at the time shall remain nameless, and it wasn't in this industry, so you won't know him. But I was a brand new mom. I'd had my first baby. She was, I think, 2 months old, so she was still really, really little. And I had gone back to work, and one day she got really sick. So I took her to the doctor's office, and the doctor is like, oh my gosh, I think it's RSV. Okay, so this is 22 years ago, and they didn't know that much about it, and it was a really scary thing. Babies were dying. And so he took us to the hospital, and we checked her right in. He's like, don't even go home. Just call your husband, tell him to meet you at the hospital. So we checked her in. So there's this little tiny newborn, and she's laying there. She's got things up her nose and stuff all over her. And I'm just, obviously, you're terrified and emotional, and it's scary. And especially being your first one, is just, it's just so emotional. So the next day I called my boss, I'd only worked for him for a few months, but he is a very engineer, and I called him and I just said, I'm in the hospital, my daughter's really sick, I don't know how long I'm going to be here, I don't know what's going to happen. And he says, well, I hope you know you can't take sick leave because it's not you that's sick. You have to take personal leave for whatever time you're gone. Really? That's what you have to say to me right now, and my baby might die? So that's a pretty extreme example, but it's real life. So I encourage you, no matter what your personality type is, to try to have compassion, especially when you're a leader. Think about, how would I want to be treated? Think about, what's really best in this situation? So yes, I filled out my leave slip correctly, but it's just something I never forgot. I'm just like, I can't believe that really happened, but it did. So compassion is important. Another thing that I think fits in here, and somebody, I think maybe Carlos talked about it, or Shane, I can't remember, but they talked about there are going to be times when we make mistakes, okay? What happens? How do we treat people when they make mistakes? Okay? Do you guys know Arthur? Arthur, stand up and let everybody look at you. Who knows Arthur? Do you guys know him? Yes. Isn't he awesome? He is definitely Arthur T. So Arthur is the city engineer at Hurricane, and I might embarrass him, and his face might turn red, but we've had the opportunity to work with him on some different projects. Last year we were working on a project, and we set up a hotline, we set up the email, we had everything all ready to go, and we found out there was some sort of a glitch, and I can't even remember if it was the hotline or the email, but one of them had been going to the wrong place. Do you remember which one it was? Was it the hotline? Our hotline number had been ported to the wrong place. And so if people had been calling, we weren't getting their calls. And so it was like probably 3 weeks when we realized this after we'd handed out our flyers. And inside I was just dying. I was just absolutely, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I was in Cedar City doing a partnering meeting. And so I called Arthur and I said, hey, can I come by your office and talk to you? So I went in there. I was like, Arthur, I have to tell you what happened. I was just sweating. But I was just like, I just got to face it. Something happened. It was a technical glitch. I just got to take it. So I sat down across the desk from him, and I told him what happened. And do you know what he said to me? He's like, Sydney, if you're not making mistakes, that means we're not working, okay? If you're having activity and you're getting things done, the mistakes are going to happen. I'm not worried about it. You got it figured out. I was just like, oh my gosh. And then I went home and thought, I want to be that kind of parent. That's the way that I want to treat my kids. And I know he's a fantastic dad too. But the way that we treat people when there are mistakes, I think that says so much about what kind of a leader we are. I read this other thing about a guy who was working for a company. And if anybody knows this story, you can correct me. I might not have it exactly right. But he was working for a company, and he made some mistake in not maintaining the equipment. And the whole thing ended up burning out the engine. It blew up, and it was like a $250,000 repair. And so he went in to talk to his boss, and he was sure he was going to get fired. He went in and talked to his boss, and his boss is like, so do you understand what happened, and do you understand what you would do differently next time? And the guy's like, yeah. And he said, okay, that's all I need to know. Go back to work. And he said, well, you're not going to fire me? He's like, I just invested $250,000 in you. I'm not going to fire you now. So people are going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. So the way that we choose to treat that as a leader, that says a lot about whether we're being a partner. Are we partnering with them, helping them to learn, and just improving as we go along? Okay, and then the last thing on this one is a desire to build leaders, not followers, okay? And again, this is something that just recently, as I've been thinking about this idea of partnership and leadership, that's just really come to me, is that that's really our goal, is to build leaders, not followers. We want people that are strong enough to lead, that have these qualities of a leader, and these are the things that we're going to talk about. To be able to have collaboration in decision-making, okay? Sometimes, what are the disadvantages of collaborative decision-making sometimes? Hey, that takes longer, doesn't it? Definitely takes a longer time. What else? What? Yeah, getting people to collaborate. Okay, sometimes people just don't want to.
There might be conflict.
Oh, there might be conflict, and then what, right? Okay, do you have any of those people who would just rather avoid conflict? Yeah. Okay, but we need to collaborate. Obviously, there's different times for different decisions. When we're in emergencies, there's just things that need to happen. But collaboration overall can be very powerful, being able to get input from other people. And as we do this, then we teach other people. We teach them the skills of leadership. We teach them how we make decisions and how we go about doing that. And there's a lot that can be gained from that. So one of the things that we've been focusing on more in our organization is just having more communication, more conversation about things that, like when we're doing a proposal, or there's a lot of things that I had just always done, so I would just continue to do them. But I've noticed as I open up just things that I've even done for a long time, as I open that up to my staff and we talk about, well, this is what I'm working on, and this is, what I'm thinking for approach, and then somebody will say, well, what about this? Or what about this? And did any of you see the little cookie trail going to our booth? Okay. Actually, I have to say, one of my friends from Langdon gave me the idea last year, but in staff meeting, Rosie, my employee from Logan, she's like, oh, I have a little vinyl cutter. I could make the cutest little cookies, and we could put them on the floor. So many things that I never would have thought of. So if you notice, there's a cookie trail that leads to our booth out there, so you can get cookies. So collaboration gives us a lot of strength. The second one there is give them opportunities to lead, okay? So that's how we train leaders to lead, is that we give them those opportunities. Do we have anybody from Civco in here? Nope, not today. Last year we had Troy Osler from Civco was in our class, and he came up and talked to us afterwards, and he's like, do you guys do consulting? And we said, yeah. And he's like, would you come out to my organization, drive all the way to Vernal, and do a workshop for us? And so we did. We did an executive session the night before, and we helped them set up their vision, mission, and values, which they'd never had. And then the next day, we did an all-day session with their team. And so one of the things that we have some processes that we use to kind of help them figure out, what they want to work on. But one of the things that came up was staff meetings. And staff meetings were very inconsistent, and he just hated doing them. I had done a long interview with him, and he's like, I just hate them. They take so much time, and they take so much preparation. And I'm like, I feel your pain. I know what it's like. I said, well, an idea that we did is that we started rotating. We have monthly staff meeting. We started rotating the responsibility. So we just set up a calendar, and someone on the staff, it's your month to do staff meeting. That means you have to put together the agenda. We always have a question of the day. That's how we get to know each other better. We've had some really incredibly creative questions of the day. So that person comes up with a question of the day. We always review our mission, vision, and values. And so they came up with very creative ways. Last time we had a crossword puzzle that had all the words from our vision, mission, and values in them. And they put together the agenda. They lead the meeting. They figure out if we're doing it around lunchtime, if we're going to have lunch. But they're just responsible. So all I have to do as the leader is I send them the agenda items, and I show up. Okay, so Troy came to talk to me yesterday. So I suggested that to him, and in this workshop we did for them last year, they decided that's what they were going to do. And so there was one really cute young engineer. She was in the EIT program, and she's like, well, I just came from another company in Louisiana. And she's like, we had really fun staff meetings. She's like, I'll do the first one, and then I'll show everybody how fun it can be. And so I saw Troy yesterday, and so he's like, this has been the greatest thing. Like, staff meeting is not painful anymore because all I have to do is show up. And so that's just one way that you can take your people and give them responsibility, have them have the opportunity to be a leader, and at the same time, as the leader, it relieves so much pressure and stress from the things that I used to worry about. So lots of things that we can do, but think of things that you as a leader typically do and say, is there a way that I can have somebody else do part of this? And that I'm creating that partnership with them, but I'm teaching them how to be a leader, teaching them how to do that. And then the last one under there is challenge them, okay? I believe that people have much more potential than we give them credit for. I know it's the fact with my children, and I just think across the board, I think people have just this untapped potential. So as we challenge them, that makes them step up. So back to my days at the Forest Service, when I worked there, the forest engineer at the time, one day we were out driving and going to look at some of the roads that we're working on, and he said, okay, here's the deal. He's like, you have $250,000, and you have this road, and this road, and you know what kind of surfacing treatments we do. You know the things that we have the possibility of doing. He's like, I want you to figure out by the time we get back to the office today, how would you spend that $250,000? And I was like, oh my gosh. It kind of set me into this panic. But then it was really cool because during our hour ride, I sat there and I asked him questions. Well, what about the drainage on this? What about this? What about that? And so by the time we got back an hour later, I'd put together my little plan and we had a chance to discuss it. And he taught me what he was thinking. And it was a really cool experience, and that was just the way that he was. He was always asking me, well, if you were the manager of this, how would you do this, or how would you run this crew? And it was just great experiences that at the time I don't think I had any idea, how great of a leader I was working with. So challenge your people, give them things that maybe you think that that right now they're not normally doing. But give them the opportunity to do more. Okay, one of the things that my dad used to always teach me, and I know you've all heard it, but he always used to tell me, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay, so while I pull the cookies out, I need you to find a buddy, and I just need you to talk for a minute with your buddy about somebody in your life. Could be a leader, could just be a friend, but somebody that's done something to show you that they care about you. And how did they do that? Okay, ready, go. Yeah. talking good. Hey, Karen, we come write. We just write some of the things that they. Okay, well, let's give you a couple of seconds to finish up your conversation. Okay, now you've had a chance to learn from somebody else. What are some of the things that you talked about? What'd somebody do?
Well, I'll talk about Carrie's experience.
Okay, that works.
Supposed to do it, right?
Yep.
So maybe I should, I won't mention names, but he came up in conversation, and when Carrie was going out on her own, this person trusted her enough to say, hey, you know, she had nothing before and said, hey, I'd love you to work for me because I know your work, and I know what you do, and trusted her enough to say, come on over, and you've got all this work, so,
Awesome.
yeah.
That's good. Very good. What else? Come on, you guys. Rod.
High expectations.
Good.
High expectations. Their staff let them know it and then follow up.
Perfect.
So kind of along those same lines is seeing somebody's potential and then like pushing them to achieve that.
Great. Perfect.
Encouraging feedback, encouraging differences of opinion to get a well-rounded view of what needs to happen.
Good. So that ties in perfectly with that collaboration. And again, it comes back to culture. And I really feel like as a leader, that's your very most important thing that you do, is you create a culture. You create the way that people feel when they come to their meetings. You create whether it's safe or not to ask a question or to give another opinion. As a leader, that's what we do, whether we realize it or not. We create that culture. How we respond to people when they do make a mistake, that's part of building that culture. Rob?
Personal touch, getting to know them and know their concerns, and I think that's really what it's about, is like you mentioned, showing you care.
Right.
Because that's, even though we have a paycheck, we get a paycheck from this organization, if that's all we're going off of, it's a pretty shallow relationship.
Right. And we spend so many hours at work, we might as well enjoy it, right? Patrick?
I think on the flip side, as a leader, if you just look at your employees as people coming up with a paycheck and you say, I'm giving you this, I expect you to do it because, hey, you're getting a paycheck. That's not the way to go about it either,
Okay.
right? So you need to help them feel that you care about, hey, yes, you may be intimidated by the work I'm asking you to do, but you can do it, and here's how, and what are your ideas, how, give them that support that maybe you're just frustrated with them because they're not accepting it right away.
Okay, perfect. Other thoughts?
Corey Pope visited an employee in the hospital and they were eager about the job.
Okay, a visit to the hospital. It's definitely showing that you care, right? Does anybody else love birthdays? I love birthdays. No, my brothers hate them. They're like, why do you always want to have a birthday party? That's so stupid. I love birthdays. So I love to celebrate other people's birthdays too. So, yeah, at one of our staff meetings just in September. Anyway, one of our employees was turning 50 the next week. So we had a surprise birthday party and it was awesome. And she loved it. Any other thoughts? What we can do? Okay, so thank you, Karen. So it's again, it's one of those things that it's not, there's no big secret here. It's things that we know, but the question is, how do we do them and how do we implement them? okay? So there's different ways in the handout there. We talked, the number one thing I put there is to be accessible. For those of you that have heard me talk, this is just my mantra. Some days it can be my main stage. We need to be present with people, okay? I'm going to repeat something that I talked about in the time management thing yesterday. But there's all kinds of, so that phrase, 100% present, comes from when I started my business. I hired a business coach. So this is 20 years ago. We had no cell phones. We had no email. And yet his number one piece of advice to me as we were putting together my business plan is, I don't really understand your business. I don't really know what you're going to do, but you need to be present with people. And he just said, if you'll be 100% present with people, you're going to be successful. So it's something that I've always worked on. But as technology keeps adding and gets more complicated, it's harder and harder to do. That's the reality. But I was reading an interesting study that came across on my Twitter feed about this executive who had a professional executive coach that was working with him. And one of the goals that he set was to be more present with his people. And so he set up goals to leave his phone in his desk when he went to a meeting, to not even bring the phone to his meeting with him. And then to turn off his phone when he went home at night so he could be with his family and not be interrupted by his phone. He did a few things like that. And so he told his coach when he was reporting back, he said, not only was I more efficient and more effective as a leader, he was like, I'm just happier. He said, it just makes me feel like I'm a better person. I feel like I'm really giving people what they deserve instead of only giving them part of, literally my presence. And so the thing that I've been working on this past year is I use a door frame. It started because it was the door frame going into my house. I would never walk in the house still on my phone. I'm usually on my phone in the car, but when I get home, I finish the phone call, hang up my phone, and when I walk in the door, my phone is in my purse, and I'm there to be with my family. So I started with the door frame of my house, but now I do it no matter where I'm at, no matter if I'm walking outside of a building or into a meeting room, but I just look at that door frame, and it's kind of like a trigger for me, and I go, I'm going to be present with whatever is on the other side of that, okay? Because usually it's people, and people are awesome. So we need to be there for people, and we need to be present with people. And as a leader, that is so important, that we're present and that we're there for people. So there's just some ideas on here. Spend time with people that you serve. There's a phrase in the Marines, they call it eyeball leadership, where the leaders actually go out and they are in the trenches. They're doing the same things that their people are doing, so that they understand the kind of things that they're performing. They understand their tasks. They understand what they're doing. Take time to figure out what drives each individual. We're all different. I love birthday parties. Some people don't, okay? There's different things that drive different people. Figure out what that is. Figure out what they love, what gets them excited. Take your people to lunch. I'm doing a little survey. I'm on a committee with the AGC studying the workforce shortage that's going on in the construction industry. So I've been doing a lot of surveys and collecting some data. And so my kids just kind of roll their eyes. But if I'm at the bank or a grocery store and I run into a contractor of any type, I talk to start up a conversation. Because one of my strengths is woo. I do want to meet everyone. A little strength finder joke there. But anyway, I met this guy at a Chinese restaurant, and he was a contractor. I had a hat on, so I started talking to him. And he owns his own company. And I said, just curious, are you being affected by the workforce shortage? And he said, nope. And I said, nothing. You're not feeling any pains from it? He's like, no, I only have 25 people. He's like, but I've had the same 25 people for so long. He's like, I can't even remember the last time I've had turnover on my staff. And I said, well, tell me what you do. And he said, actually, it's really simple. Every day, I go out to one of my crews and I take one guy to lunch. And he said, I just take him out to lunch. And he said, we'll talk about kids, we'll talk about hobbies. And he said, and then typically the last 2 minutes, they'll tell me something that's maybe bugging them that's going on, or maybe there's a personality conflict somewhere, or something that I'm doing is just not sitting right with them. He's like, and then we'll talk about it, and they go back to work. And the next day I take somebody else to lunch. He said, literally, he said, it's probably been 10 years since I've had to hire a new employee. Okay, the power of taking somebody to lunch and listening to them. Those employees know that he cares about them, that he listens to them, and that obviously I think he tweaks his processes according to what his employees are telling him. That was very powerful. Just walking around the office, again, another experience from my past life. I came to work for an organization, and I didn't know who the boss of the office was. There were probably like maybe 60 people in that office, and I didn't know who he was, and I didn't know what he looked like. And I kept thinking that someday he was going to come meet me, even though I was just a lowly designer in a designer cubicle. I thought, well, he'll come say hi to me, welcome to our office. No. So after I'd been there literally over 2 months, we had an all-employee meeting, and then I was like, oh, so that's who my boss is. Yeah, I didn't even know who he was. So over the period of time that I worked in that organization, I had been a certified facilitator in total quality management, and so I just said, I have this training, I have this background. If you guys would like to do this, I'd be more than happy to help you out. And so we started implementing some total quality management, and things were moving along. We had these work groups, accomplishing a lot of stuff. And one thing that just kept coming up is that this boss is just not accessible at any point in time. And so I met with him one day, and I just said, I think it'd be really great if you went out and you just went around and talked to people. He's like, seriously? And I said, yeah. And he's like, well, what would I say? I said, well, you could look and see what pictures they have on their desk, or maybe ask about their family. Or he's like, that'd be so awkward. I'm like, please, will you try it? And so I got him. He did it twice, and then he's like, I just can't do it. It's too stressful for me. So he didn't do it anymore, but in replacement of that, we set up what we called the listening post. And he set up an hour a week that was listening post time, that people could just come into his office and talk about any ideas that they had, anything that was bugging him. For him, that worked. People could come to him in his space, and it wasn't as awkward, and he felt better about that. So we all have different personalities. We're all different. But find something that works for you where people can access you, where they can talk to you, they can approach you, it can be safe, and you can be able to share together. The next thing is be proactive. So as leaders especially, we're all busy, right? There's so much that we have to do. But part of that, one of the most important things that we have to do is to develop our people. So as we're proactive, we need to figure out whether it's that guy planning his days around taking his people to lunch, or whatever it is, we just need to plan that and make it a priority and not something that just slips away from us. If you remember the time management quadrant that came out of the 7 Habits book, one of the quadrants was things that are important but not urgent, okay? I think a lot of these leadership things, it's probably not urgent today, but it's still important. And if we don't schedule it in and make it happen sometime, then it's just not going to happen. Okay, this next section I have on number 5, you may be thinking, why in the world would she be giving us a list of traits for entrepreneurs? As I've been thinking about leadership, and as I've been thinking about partnership and leadership together, this is something that I've thought about. As a leader, and for me specifically, as a leader of my company, I'm there to create value. I'm there to create value so that our company continues to be profitable, so that my people continue to have jobs, and so that we can add value to clients. Can you guys all see this okay? So that's what I think my number one job is to create value. Different parts of the way that I do that are developing the people. Okay? I think that's one specific thing, that's part of my role as a leader, is to develop people. Another one is we need to do marketing. We need to do some sort of way to find business. So if you're in a government entity, obviously you don't go out and directly market. What would be something that you would put in there that would be similar to private people going to market so that they have work to do? What would be kind of an activity that we could say, or a category we could say for government people? Okay, so collaborate with other divisions. And then this one, I just plain have to manage the business. I need to know where we are with profit and loss. I need to, know how much work we have on the books. I need to manage all that. So as I've thought about this, it's like, okay, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know there's a lot to do, and it gets overwhelming. But as I break it out like this, I think, okay, those are the things that I do that add value to my company. But then I started thinking, what if I could teach each person that works for me to do the same thing? They know that they need to add value, but what if they have their own little world where they also are developing people? Some of them have people that directly report to them, some of them don't, but they still can have this responsibility to develop people around them, to do the same things, the things that we're talking about, to care and to share and to help them collaborate. And then marketing. Okay, why does it just have to be me that does marketing, right? What if they have their own little world of marketing? And so maybe somebody just has a project. How much responsibility do we give them to be responsible for the people on the project, the marketing, the collaboration on the project, the finances on the project? I think sometimes as leaders, we take too much on ourselves. And again, it's part of that challenge thing. I think we can challenge our people more and that we can get them to do more of these things. And then who wins when we do that? Okay, everybody wins, right? If we can teach all of our people to be leaders themselves and to do these same things in a business or in the government setting, I think the words might be different, but I think the idea is the same, that you have ownership, then we all win. And so this is why I love this thing about the 20 attributes of successful entrepreneurs. Okay, like I say, you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. Why did you give me this? I want you to look at these attributes, and I just want you to go through them and rate on a scale of 1 to 5. You yourself, how do you feel you're doing? Just on a scale of 1 to 5, as far as being focused on whatever it is that your responsibilities are. As far as being optimistic, I think that's one of the biggest things that influences a culture. If I choose to be optimistic, when we go to our meetings, when I have my one-on-one performance reviews, and all the interactions that I have, if I'm optimistic, that makes a huge difference. By the way, that's actually one of our core values at Jakes & Associates. You will be optimistic, okay? But it's something that we can choose. We can choose to be doom and gloom, or we can choose to, be happy and optimistic. So I want to give you a couple minutes, and I want you to just run through those real quick, and just on a scale of 1 to 5, just see how you are doing personally on those different attributes. Okay, so we'll go on from there. But do you see, am I stretching too far? Do you see how those really, I think, tie to being a leader? Does that make sense to you guys? I think the same traits that it takes to be an entrepreneur, to be a leader, you need to be innovative, you need to be communicative, you need to be self-motivated. I think they all apply. So I think it's just kind of a good kind of a just a self-reflection. How am I doing there? How am I doing in this area? The very last thing I have written on here, John Maxwell. Has anybody read his books? Fantastic. Love everything that he writes. But his last quote, you can love people without leading them, but you cannot lead people without loving them. Okay? Some of you have probably heard me talk about my dad. I had the opportunity to grow up on a farm in Montana. It's the best growing up that you could ever ask for, just absolutely perfect. Growing up on a farm with just awesome parents, I learned how to work hard. My dad taught me so much. My dad went from being a dairy farmer. For a while, he had the largest dairy farm in Montana. Then we had a couple of floods, and he lost a bunch of cows, and then the milk prices plummeted, and he was on the verge of bankruptcy. Didn't know what he was going to do, had 4.5 kids at the time, trying to figure out, where do I go from here? And he had been serving on a United Way board of directors as a volunteer, and he was working with all the farmers and ranchers, going around collecting donations for United Way. And so the chairman of that board was actually the manager of a stock brokerage firm in our town in Great Falls, Montana. And so the chairman of the board could see my dad was in this dilemma, and he said to him, he said, you should come take this aptitude test and maybe become a stockbroker. And my dad just laughed out loud. He's like, I'm a dirt farmer. He always called himself Bert the Dirt Farmer. He's like, I could never be a stockbroker. And this guy said, you know what? You can go out and collect more money for United Way than the rest of us can put together. I think you should come take the aptitude test. So my dad went and he took the aptitude test. He ended up becoming a stockbroker. He kept 25 acres so he could raise his kids on the farm. And he became a stockbroker, and then he became the manager of this big brokerage firm. And he just was the best partner leader that you could ever imagine. And I've told other stories about him, but he would have all the families come out to the farm, and we'd do corn roasts and barbecues and take all the kids on hay rides. But everything that we've talked about today is just the way that my dad lived his life. And it didn't matter if it was in his position as the manager of that stock brokerage firm, or when he was, running milkers. Those poor milkers that used to work for him on the dairy farm. I mean, never a day off, right? Like, just so much hard work. But they were all so loyal and so committed to my dad just because of the way that he was. My dad passed away almost 3 years ago now. And his funeral in Little Great Falls, Montana, not that big of a town, his funeral was over 600 people and just standing room only. And it was just so amazing because just little parts of his life, some from work, some from church, some from community, he had just touched so many lives. And it just all comes back to, he just loved everyone. And at the funeral, my best friend was there, and my best friend's younger sister was there. And my best friend's younger sister came up to me and she said, I just have to tell you a story. She said, whenever Susie came out to the farm to go to your house, I was always so jealous. I just always thought, oh, I wish I got to go to Thurber's farm. She's like, and one time I got to go with Susie. And she said, you and Susie were jumping on the trampoline and running all around, and your dad came out and said, do you want to shoot baskets? And she's like, I felt like I was the most important person in the world. She's like, I have no idea how long your dad spent with me, but he taught me how to shoot baskets. He took me for a ride on his tractor. And she's like, 40 years later, it's one of the best memories of my life because he just made me feel like I was so important. And so as I think about leadership, we never can estimate the impact that we can have on people's lives. So it doesn't have to be in a supervisory role. It can be at home. It can be with the kids in the neighborhood. My dad had really literally one interaction with this person. And 40 years later, she still felt so touched because of the way he made her feel. So some of us come here with different strengths and different things that we're stronger at naturally. But I know for a fact that we can become better leaders. We can choose to create these kind of characteristics that will help us to be better leaders, which will help us to create not only better followers, but better leaders themselves, which is just going to make the world a better place to be. So thanks for being here.